The evening sun painted the town of Dry Creek in warm amber light, turning the dust of its streets into a shimmering haze. Folks gathered on porches, leaning against posts, chatting loud enough for half the town to hear. It was Saturday, and that meant one thing: another gathering at the community hall. The women wore their newest dresses, bought from traveling merchants or ordered from glossy catalogs in the big cities, fabrics bright as spring blossoms and cut to the latest fashions. But amid the colors and lace, a girl named Clara stood out, not because of grandeur but because of simplicity. Clara wore her mother's old dress, a faded blue gown with hand-stitched lace at the sleeves, patched carefully at the hem where time had frayed it. It was the only nice dress she had, passed down after her mother died. She wore it with pride. Yet the whispers had already started before she even reached the hall. "Would you look at that? She's wearing that rag again. Poor girl doesn't even know what real fashion is." Laughter snickered behind painted fans and polished boots. Clara walked past, her chin high though her cheeks burned hot. Every word striking her like a stone. She wanted to sink into the dust and vanish, but she refused to show her hurt. Her mother had sewn every stitch of that dress by lantern light, humming lullabies as she worked. To Clara, it wasn't just clothing, it was a memory, a connection to the woman she lost too soon. Still, the sting of mockery was hard to bear. She slipped to the edge of the crowd, her heart aching, wishing she could disappear. That was when a tall figure emerged from the other end of the street. A cowboy, broad-shouldered, with a weathered hat pulled low, and boots that had known long miles. His presence silenced a few chuckles, for he carried himself with quiet strength, the kind that didn't need to boast. His name was Colt McGraw, known for being as steady with his word as he was with his gun. As he approached, Clara tried to turn away, not wanting anyone to notice her anymore. But he stopped right in front of her, his sharp eyes taking her in. For a moment she thought he might laugh too. Instead, he tipped his hat and said, low but firm enough for every ear nearby to hear, "That's a beautiful dress." The words seemed to hang in the air. A hush fell over the crowd. Clara blinked, certain she misheard. "Pardon?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Colt gave a half-smile, the kind that carried more truth than a dozen compliments. "I said it's beautiful. Don't reckon I've ever seen finer work. Whoever made it knew what they were doing." His gaze softened, not on the fabric, but on her, on the pride she tried to hide, on the love stitched into that dress by hands long gone. "It suits you, miss. Makes you look like you belong right here in the heart of this town." Heat rose in Clara's chest, but this time it wasn't from shame. For the first time that night, she felt seen, not as the poor girl in a worn dress, but as someone worth noticing. The crowd shifted, their laughter drying up under the weight of his words. The very same women who had mocked her now found themselves silent, their bright silks suddenly feeling gaudy. One of them muttered something about fresh air and hurried off. The men who had chuckled earlier coughed awkwardly and looked away. Clara stood straighter, her eyes shining. She thought of her mother's hands, guiding a needle through cloth, whispering to her little girl that beauty wasn't in what others saw, it was in what you carried in your heart. Now here was a man who understood that truth. Colt didn't linger long. Cowboy seldom did. But before he walked off toward the hall, he tipped his hat again. "Don't let nobody tell you different," he said. "That dress has more story in it than all their fancy ribbons combined." And with that, he left her with a gift greater than any jewel, the gift of dignity restored. The night went on, but the air had changed. When Clara entered the hall, heads turned again, but not with scorn. They saw her with new eyes. Some even smiled. A few offered compliments, though none rang as true as the cowboy's. She danced that night, her heart lighter than it had been in years, her steps carrying the rhythm of confidence. The dress didn't feel old anymore, it felt timeless. Later, when the music slowed and folks drifted home, Clara stood on the porch of the hall and looked up at the stars. She knew she'd never forget the moment. One man's words drowned out the cruelty of many. Sometimes all it takes is one voice of kindness to silence a chorus of mockery. And that, she realized, was the real beauty her mother had sewn into every stitch. As the dust settled on the quiet street, Clara whispered to the night, "Thank you, Mama, you were right." And maybe, just maybe, she hoped the cowboy would cross her path again. And that, friends, is the story of how a simple dress became a symbol of love, courage, and dignity. If you believe in stories that lift hearts and remind us of the power of kindness, make sure to subscribe to this channel. Each story here is meant to inspire, heal, and remind you that even in the hardest times, One voice of truth can change everything. Don't miss the next one. Hit that subscribe button today.